In this video, we're going to be covering another set of three tools, starting off with the dodge tool, then the burn tool, and finally the sponge tool. So let's start off with the dodge tool. Now, I got a picture of the rock up again. I'm going to hit Command plus to zoom in on his face here. What these tools do is they kind of amplify already existing pixels in terms of highlights, shadows, and saturation. Okay, so for the dodge tool located here, and by the way, just like the previous tools I showed you with the blur and smudge as well as eraser, you can change the strength. Uh, well, actually, it's exposure for this particular tool, which is pretty much like the strength. In other words, for the strength, right here, exposure, and I'll cover the this a little bit later after I go through all three tools. But we'll leave it on default settings for now. Excuse me. So, starting off with the dodge tool, what the dodge tool does it amplifies highlighted pixels, or it turns pixels a lighter shade or exposure. So to demonstrate this, say if you wanted to bring out the, I'm going to switch to the move tool just so I have a pointer to point out. So you notice there's some highlights on his nose, some here on his temple, cheek, and chin area. If you wanted to accentuate that, then you would use the dodge tool to really make it pop out. So let me go ahead and activate the dodge tool by clicking on it. And like with all brushes, folks, if you folks can see my brush here right below his ear, you can change the size once more. Right bracket key to make the brush bigger, and left bracket key to make it smaller. We're going to make it smaller, or try to match up the size of the brush with what we're trying to paint. So the highlights are fairly small right here on the tip of his nose. So we want to match up the size of the brush to roughly just a little bit bigger than what the highlight is. The reason being is the larger the brush, the more area gets affected. So if we want to localize, or if we want to just affect a small concentrated portion, we have to keep the paintbrush small just to affect only that portion. So I'm going to left mouse click and hold it down, hold down my left mouse button and just brush over the area once or twice. So you already see how with just 2 clicks I really made the highlights on the tip of his nose pop. Now here on the side of his nose, here's a highlight. I'm just going to brush there, quick one. And then on the side of his temple up here by his forehead, I'm just going to do a quick swipe, or hold down the left mouse button and paint over there. Now that might be a little bit too strong. Okay, so what we can do is see for his nose, it, the nose tends to be outward, so it'll pick up brighter highlights, and it's usually tends to be more oilier a part of the head. So of course you can see that kind of shine on the nose, but unless he was really sweating, then this type of shine that doesn't look natural. So in that case, what we can do is bring the exposure down, come up here to exposure in the tool options bar, and just I'm holding down my left mouse button as I scroll across the word. I'm going to bring the exposure down real low to probably about 15%. And I'm going to go over uh, this area again. So I'm going to hold down my left mouse button, just paint over. So that's a little bit more subtle, yet it does bring out the highlights a little bit more. Now I'm going to go over his cheek here, the right side of his cheek. So I'm just painting, holding down my left mouse button, and that really makes that pop. Now for his chin here, I'm going to try it, but it already looks fairly bright, but I'm going to try it anyway. So you notice how that much wider it's becoming. So let me go between his eyebrows up here on the bridge of his nose. I see some white over here, so I'm going to try and highlighting over here by painting over it. See, so you can do subtle effects like this to really make highlights pop or brighten up dark areas. So if I come under his chin here, you notice this dark shadow area. If I use the dodge tool, it will lighten up the dark area. So I'm going to make my brush bigger by hitting the right open bracket key, and then I'm going to left mouse click and just keep brushing, holding it down, the left mouse button, and brushing over the area. As you can see, it really lightens up everything. So this tool will amplify whites and it'll lighten dark areas. That's what the dodge tool does. Sometimes it doesn't work too good. Like instead of a shadow, now it looks like he has bruising going on under his chin there. If you see here on the side of his cheek, almost by his ear, I'm lightening the color of his skin. So the dodge tool is something I use quite often for various reasons. Now if I come up to his forehead up here, this darker area, it can lighten up. So as you can see, it's a fairly nice tool to have to lighten up dark areas. As you can see with the shadows down here, it didn't do that great of a job. But for the rest of the skin that had dark areas, you can bring it up a few shades lighter. Okay, so that's what the dodge tool does. Let me show you the dodge tool on an inanimate object here, which is just a vase. So if you use the dodge tool on the highlighted parts already, you're just basically making it brighter, almost like painting with white, you could say. That's what the dodge tool does. It's like adding white to your picture. So if you come over a shadow area and use the dodge tool, it's basically toning down the shadow a bit, making it a little bit brighter. And if it's bright to begin with, you're just amplifying the brightness even more. Okay, so that's what the dodge tool does. Now the burn tool does the exact opposite. It's basically almost painting with black, so anything that is dark will become even darker. Anything that is light will become a few shades darker. So let's try it with all of the places where we originally painted highlights with the dodge tool. So like the tip of his nose. Let's go over a few times with that. You notice his nose starts becoming really dark and red. It doesn't eliminate the shine, but it does turn up the contrast on his nose, as you can see there. Now for shadows, it'll make the shadows even darker. So As you can see, the shadow under his chin becomes really dark there. Now you can also add shadow almost with this. I'll show you folks by just using the right side of his cheek here. So if you keep going over the same area with the brush, I'm just holding down the left mouse button and brushing over the same area. You notice it slowly becomes really dark. So it looks like he's got a sunburn at first, but if I keep going, and let's click the left mouse button again, click the left mouse button again. Every time I release the left mouse button and click it once more, it becomes even darker and darker. And if I click it a whole bunch of times, left mouse click, you notice that it starts getting bad real fast. Okay? So that's basically what, let me revert this back. So this tool basically adds a darker shadow to certain areas, or it amplifies already dark areas. So it's basically painting with black, the opposite of the dodge tool. So let's use the burn tool on the vase here. If you got a light area, use this tool. It turns it a little bit darker. And if you use it on already dark areas, you just amplify the darkness even more. So basically painting with black. So that's what the dodge tool does. You can add or amplify dark pixels, or add darkness to light pixels. Okay, let's revert that back to normal. And finally, I'm going to show you the last tool, which is the sponge tool. The sponge tool is a saturation tool, meaning it turns up the saturation of colored pixels. So I'm gonna hit the saturation tool. Oh, let me right now it's set to desaturate, so let's saturate. Okay, so I'm going over his right cheek right now. So the saturation is basically making the pixels a lot more vibrant. As you can see here, as I paint across his face. So if your picture is dull in color and you really want to bring up the vibrance, like, you know, you see on those television displays in a store where they have real vibrant reds and greens and yellows. That's the vibrancy of the image. So that's what this tool does. It really cranks up a vibrant or a dull colored picture and makes it a lot more vibrant. Now you got to be careful with this tool. As you can see, if I keep going over the same spot over and over, it really gets out of hand really quickly. So with these tools, the dodge, burn, and sponge tool, you folks really want to pay attention and use it sparingly, mostly to accent or highlight certain features of your image, but you don't really want to overuse it that much, or else it could get out of hand really quickly. Okay. Now you folks did see that I was using the when I first activated the saturate or the sponge tool. Instead of making it vibrant, it made it dull. That's because the original setting was set to desaturate. So if you go up to the toolbar here, tool options bar, and from this drop down menu you can select saturate or desaturate. If you choose desaturate, of course you're going to make the picture more dull. So I'm going to come to his lips here and teeth, and it's set to desaturate right now. I'm going to desaturate his mouth. So just left mouse click and brush over his mouth area. Sometimes you got to keep clicking on the left mouse button and wiping across, but you see that I'm slowly starting to turn his mouth black and white because I'm stripping away or desaturating it, which is basically stripping away all the color out of it. Almost looks like the Joker in a way now. But that's what desaturating does, right? You take away the color. I'm doing his right cheek now. And folks might hear it in a video. I'm just continuously clicking my left mouse button and taking swipes. So that's desaturating with the sponge tool. And you don't really mess with the flow that much, or at least I don't when I use this tool. Basically, you're just going to select saturate or desaturate and just paint straight. So you can add color back again. But like I said, folks, be very careful when using a tool. These particular set of tools, you want to use it sparingly, or you could get really messed up effects. Let's use the saturation tool here on the vase. So you can really pump up the brightness of the vase with the saturation tool. And if you keep clicking over the same spot, you notice how really neon green type of green you get here, becoming really vibrant. If you use it in a dark area, you just get a lighter shade of the dark pixels. So that's what the sponge tool does. And of course you can always desaturate the picture or turn it gray by stripping away all of the color out of it. Okay, so that's what the this tool do. Dodge tool adds whiteness to a picture. It brightens up pixels. The burn tool adds darkness and darkens pixels, and the sponge tool adds vibrant color, or it amplifies the vibrancy of the color, or it can desaturate or strip away the color. So real simple and straightforward tools.